Well, good to have you all. And we're going to continue the class on the molecular relationship. And we're leaving off talking about um approaches to union and the importance of starting from the top down and creating relationships rather than the bottom up. The natural tendency of the natural person, of the lower man, so to speak, lower man, woman, is to be attracted to the physical first and then move up later on. And but if the focus is on the physical, then it makes it difficult to move up to higher unions until we eventually have the spiritual union. So the important thing is to focus on the highest that you can conceive of. If the person, the highest he knows is romantic energy, then he should do the romance part first. If the highest he knows is pure reason and mind, then he wants to go after the mind and focus on finding people now, not only romantic relationships, but friends that thinks the way that he does. Uh, on the emotional level, you go after people that feel the way that you do. And this is the way it is in the political world. They're all joining others that feel the way that they do more than think the way that they do. A lot of people in politics just aren't thinking at all very much these days. But in all relationships, and we begin with the highest, and then we go up to the heart energies and then the pure spirit. So we want to go as high as we can in all of our relationships we establish. And we're creating a relationship here, which I originally called my first draft of the molecular relationship, I called it the molecular marriage. And then I changed it to molecular relationship. I thought it had a lot better ring to it. But molecular marriage is actually pretty accurate because in the spiritual relationships, it is like a marriage, and that the people in relationship are attempting to create a union. And what is marriage but a union where you can rely on each other, depend on each other. And so this molecular marriage was an appropriate title, but like I say, molecular relationship has a more universal ring to it. And so we'll start off here by, I'll go through an example of uh, uh, establishing a spiritual relationship. We'll start off by talking about a guy named Jim, and his consciousness is centered in the heart, and he's motivated by love wisdom. He meets a gal named Sue, and he's impressed by her and wants to investigate the possibility of a long-term relationship with her. He finds her physically attractive, but does not like the idea of becoming physically intimate too soon. He may not be able to explain why, but he's always wanted sex to be more than physical gratification. He also resists the natural inclination he feels to capture her emotionally too soon. He feels this would interfere with his judgment as to whether she would be a good partner. He sees love as something more than a deep emotional involvement. He considers a deep friendship as more important than romantic love. Now, even though Jim is very attracted to Sue, he resists the impulse towards physical involvement and first tries to make friends with her just as he would approach a male that he likes. He feels that if he can look upon her first, not as a male or female, but as a good friend, then he can truly love without romantic attachment. Then a permanent relationship can work. In his friendship with Sue, he often finds himself in situations where he knows that he could stimulate her in an emotional desire love by speaking the right words or making the right gestures. But these inclinations he resists until the time is right. He wants first to take the friendship to a critical level before making the move to romantic involvement. He also finds himself in a situation where he knows he could stimulate Sue's physical desire for him. There are times when he knows a touch or a hug or a squeeze at the right moment would stir desire energies within her. These inclinations he also resists, for the stimulation of these energies would hinder his purpose to an even higher degree. Jim's friends thinks he's a bit odd for not making the moves on Sue, for she is very attractive. But he's not concerned about what they think. Jim is most interested in establishing a beautiful relationship. Now, one person, however, is very impressed, and that is Sue. She finds that she is very attracted to Jim, but she hasn't yet become close enough to him to emotionally experience those deep longing feelings that she has had with other men in her past. Yet she feels that if something could break the ice, she could be closer to Jim emotionally than anyone she has ever met. Okay, so I need to put somebody on mute here. Sorry about that. See where we are. Um, she she feels that if something could break the ice, she could be closer to Jim emotionally than anyone she's ever met. She finds that she is pleased that Jim respects her enough as a person to establish a non-romantic friendship. She thinks Jim is refreshingly different and waits with quiet anticipation for him to advance a relationship toward a greater involvement. Finally, the time comes when Jim feels the moment is right. He speaks the loving words to Sue. He tells her how much he admires her and wants to get closer to her. He touches and caresses her at the right time and looks her in the eyes in ways that expresses his feelings toward her. Waves of desire and intense emotional feelings pass between them, and at this moment they enjoy togetherness as they never had before. They have a moment of fullness that is never known between those who begin with the physical and even the emotional level and try to move up. By starting at their highest consciousness and moving down, Jim and Sue find they can experience a fullness in 3 levels of energy. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting approach here that Jim had. So have any of you females have ever been approached that way by another male, or do they just kind of want to focus on the physical side? Yeah, well, Rulina, she's a single gal. That's a nice looking gal, lady. Rulina, have you, is this the type of guy that you kind of wish you could meet?
Yeah, I haven't yet. Well, my dad was more that way, but
Was he?
no, I haven't had that opportunity yet.
Yeah, as far as you know, your dad was that way, huh? Well, good. At least you had a good example there. But yeah, this is there aren't too many Jims out there in the world, and many people on the spiritual path were not a Jim in the past, but maybe they would be that way now if they could start over. And so anyway, the point there, the point of the story is if the person can focus on the highest first and seek that. And this is the same principle we apply with the gathering. With the gathering, we're looking to bring people into our group, we're looking for the highest in everybody we meet. And when we find others that kind of vibrate that highest part, that spiritual energy, then we want them to join in the group energy with us. If the person is just in developing personal power and wants to be able to impress others with a psychic energy, then he's not really ready for what we have in mind. But if he or she is seems to be focused on the Christ-like love and higher mind, then that's a person that we like to be around. And if we were looking for a romantic relationship, it's also the type of person that we would choose for that. Okay, any comments on that little story or example before we move on?
Yes, JJ, I do. Now, when you first began, you have described Jim and Sue. Your example are two enlightened beings or of higher awareness, and so they're pretty much on the same level spiritually. So she sort of understood where he was, where what his reticence was. When you began, you began the story, I assumed that Sue was not not enlightened in any way, and I was thinking, Sue is probably thinking that Jim, since he's not making any overtures, is not really interested. So she might just move away. But you described Jill. So, but I guess it would depend on both people, reading one another properly or being, on that same level. As I said, one may not be, so one may construe that as just not interest.
Yeah, in the story, Sue is also fairly enlightened. That's why Jim is attracted to her. But I've heard a lot of women before comment on people they think maybe be like Jim, but he just doesn't have a strong motivation toward a relationship. So, or maybe the person may be even gay. So they think, hey, this is a person after my mind and spirit, and it turns out he's just not interested. So, but Jim is the ideal. Jim is interested, but he holds back the lower and focuses on the higher. And Jim is the ideal. And there aren't too many Jims around there, but all of us guys should be focused to be like Jim. And if on the female side, focus in that direction also. The females don't really go after men aggressively the way men go after women, but they have their own ways of bringing men into their field. So they need to apply a lot the same principles. Okay, let's move on here to a second example.
I had a question.
Oh, yeah.
In regards to the molecular chats that we have and the individual triad chats, can we add people into those chat groups that are not members of the molecular group?
Well, there's no really rules of the chat group. Who started the chat group anyway? Was that you?
Yeah.
Well, you can make any rule you want for the chat group. Now,
actually, Nimrod started it.
Oh, did he? But but as far as these, if you find a good prospect for our class, you can just invite him, and he can come in and see if he likes it, and that would be one thing to do with people. That
this person that I'm thinking of off the bat is a girl from Taiwan, and we met on Second Life, and as soon as we started talking, it just lit up. This girl needs to hear us, the stuff we talk about. And she joined the Keys the very next day, and I'm thinking I'd like to eventually see her a member of the Blue Triad that I'm.
If you want, you can send her a link to our classes that we have, and she can attend a couple and see if
I've
she
sent her
likes.
a copy of the molecular relationship and all that. This person is just, she's like my star student. All of a sudden, everything that her that motivates her and whatnot. And gosh, this person just really belongs here.
Okay, well, good. Good. Okay, we'll go to the next example here. Next example is a guy called Dave. Dave is a thinker. He's a person of ideas. He's a person of logic and reason and draws much inspiration from the world of the intuition. He often feels like a stranger in a strange land and tires of having to constantly reach down to an emotional level to establish relationships. He feels that he usually has only a surface relationship with most people he's met. He'd never met anyone that he would like to make a permanent bond with, but he's always looking. Before I proceed here, has anybody kind of felt that way? Kind of like you have a difficulty in finding people for close friendships or relationships on a level, that spiritual level, that you like?
It could be. Oh, I'm sorry to just jump in. Could be just a situation of being socially awkward too. The
Yeah,
skill.
that can happen, but that can happen too. But yeah, the socially awkward person, which I have been in my past, doesn't feels a vacuum just because nobody's there, whereas the more enlightened person feels a vacuum because he cannot find people. He can find people, but not people that can share on the level that he wants to share with. This is a problem. Many people that are into the light have. Okay. Anyway, one day he meets Elizabeth. He has a short conversation with her and found her stimulating. So he decided to check out the possibility of further involvement. Even though she is very attractive, an immediate physical relationship is the last thing from his mind. He feels he is not the slightest bit tempted to explore that yet. Now, Elizabeth is also a person of strong feelings, and David consents this, but he consciously avoids any action or speech to stimulate those lower feelings. For he knows too soon emotional involvement will often fog the mind, so one cannot view the relationship in a correct perspective. Now, David is not even interested in establishing a deep friendship, even though he senses that this could be done quite quickly. A deep friendship may have a disadvantage of pulling his mind the wrong direction if the girl is not what he's looking for. And what is Dave looking for? David has been a searcher all his life. He's always looking for new truth and seeking to expand his consciousness. He has a strong sense of mission and seeks someone to help him accomplish the directions given by his soul. He will be interested in Elizabeth as she is a true seeker of light and truth. He decides to test Elizabeth's response and seeks another encounter with her. He asks her some questions and explains to her some of his philosophy, life, and goals. He finds that she is very interested and curious. She asks him many questions on various topics she has wondered about throughout her entire life and is stimulated by David's answers. David is now convinced that Elizabeth is a true seeker and may help him fulfill his life's purpose. He begins to establish a deep friendship with her. Then when the time is right, he proceeds downward from the heart energies, just as Jim did. Finally, when they begin their physical relationship, the two make a bonding covenant and are joined together for time indefinite through the energies of the soul. David and Elizabeth experience a sharing of energies felt by few people on earth, and seek a fullness of sharing on all four energy levels. The degree they both share is dependent upon the sensitivity of both to the energies of the soul and spirit. Generally speaking, the sharing of both cannot be much higher than the degree of the soul contact experienced by the weaker partner. Thus, if Elizabeth is at a lower level of consciousness than David, David will have much incentive to lift her up for the benefit of both. Only by lifting her consciousness can David share in the higher energies with her, and vice versa. After the bonding is consummated, David and Elizabeth share not only the energies of heart and mind to a high degree, but also experience emotional and physical fulfillment that is felt by few. Highly evolved people seek not for the fulfillment on spiritual level only, but view all levels as one great chord, where all the notes must vibrate to perfect harmony. The physical and emotional notes are to be played as well as the higher notes. So you people that are musical, what's the difference between a note and a chord?
A chord is a few notes played together.
Right, it has a different sound, doesn't it? Would you
Yep.
say a chord has a fullness of, a lot more fullness of sound? It has a interesting vibration, and there's all kinds of different chords. And a note has just a single sound. They're both beautiful, but the chord has an intensity of beauty that a single note doesn't have. So if in a relationship, you're just focusing on a single sharing, you're like playing one note. If you focus on sharing on multiple levels, then you two are like playing a chord together. And then as we join in a molecular relationship, it's like we're going to play a symphony together. And that's where the real beauty will lie.
Yeah, notes are like letters of the alphabet, and chords are like words.
Yeah, right. Right. And then
I thought
you have words,
a
and then
note
you
would
have
be-
stories. Yeah.
Yeah, a note would be something you'd take home from your teacher to show your mom because you were bad, and a chord would be what she would use to beat your butt with from the note that you brought home.
Well, that's one way to look at it. Okay. There are two basic desires for mastery over the consciousness. There's the lower and the higher self, and they are always at odds with each other. And as a person progresses on his journey to liberation, he's dominated completely by the lower self. And he's not even aware there is a higher self. And so he thinks the lower self is all there is. And when he thinks the lower self is all there is, he's pretty much focused in his physical identity. He identifies with the physical world. Now, all of us have souls that have identified with the physical world to a degree. To begin our evolution, our soul had to identify with the lower realms. It was the only way to make incarnation. So our soul projected our essence down into the physical worlds, and it identified with that. And because our soul has used a certain amount of energy to identify with form, we have this tremendous instinct not to hurt ourselves and not to die and to live as long as we can. Now we hear these stories and the after-death experiences of how blissful and wonderful the afterlife is. And when these people come back from a near-death experience, a lot of them say they didn't want to come back because it was so great over there. And they're looking forward to dying now. And but those who haven't had that experience, we have that we still, and even those who have, still have that strong identification from the soul. We, you know, we don't want to touch the hot stove and burn ourselves. We don't want to scratch ourselves, or we don't want to get an injury. We have this tremendous instinct to stay alive, and not only stay alive, but take really good care of our physical bodies. And this is something our soul wants us to do. And the reason it is achievable is because the soul and the higher self, you could say, which includes actually more than the soul, has projected this energy and consciousness down, clear down to the physical level. And that creates this powerful link that causes us to have this tremendously powerful instinct to stay alive and to stay well and to stay focused in the physical world. Now, there's a positive and negative to this instinct. The positive is that it keeps us here. Without that projection, this powerful link, we wouldn't even stay here. We would come here, and if that link wasn't here, we would say, well, I don't like it here. I liked it a lot better in the spiritual world. I'm going back. So we'd probably kill ourselves as soon as the opportunity came. So, but because the soul has made that link, unless we get really depressed, we don't want to kill ourselves. We want to stay here as long as we possibly can. Like, I'm 75 years old, and you know, I'm not ready to go yet. I still have this strong impulse to stay here as long as I'm able to function. So this comes from this link that is made, and this strong link for existence on this lower level. Even though from a wholeness perspective, this is the worst place to be. This is where we want to be more than anywhere else because of this link right now. So we want to be here. We want to stay here. We want to wake up in the morning and still be in our physical body, still feel raring to go, still feel happy to tackle the day. But this creates a big limitation. It means that the general idea of focus is on the lower worlds. And it's very hard for us, because of this strong link of the survival instinct, to even think that there's higher worlds that we can identify with. And so eventually, though, as we progress from life to life, we finally reach that point to where we think, there's got to be something more than this. And then eventually the person begins to make these higher links. And when he makes these higher links and becomes aware that there is a higher self, that there is a spiritual essence, that there is more than just the physical world, then there's a battle. There's the battleground of the ages is between these two worlds, the higher and the lower. And first of all, the lower keeps defeating the higher. The higher tries to come in and dominate, but the lower, impulsed by this survival instinct, by this link the soul has to have to keep us here, this powerful instinct keeps prevailing over, and the higher keeps trying to dominate, but the lower says, no, I just want to live my life and enjoy it. And you're okay there in the background, but I'm not going to let you dominate. But then eventually the power to dominate comes, and the soul, the person's consciousness begins to identify with a higher over the lower. And this takes a long period of time. But when the higher dominates, we still have that instinct to stay alive and to preserve ourselves and stay healthy. But everything is then switched from a lower perspective to a higher. And it's to the extent that eventually the disciple is even willing to give up his life if necessary for the will of the higher. And this is like the ultimate identification with the higher is exemplified by the Christ giving his life, by the saints and the lights of the earth sacrificing themselves for a higher purpose. And many people have sacrificed themselves for a higher purpose in our history. And these people are often seen as great heroes to those other people of light. Okay.
JJ, do you mind if I add just something real quick? It's Natalie.
Oh, sure. Good to hear from you, Natalie. How you been doing?
Thanks. Well,
Are you
since I have-
gonna become a regular here with us?
we'll see.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah,
Um,
go ahead with your comment.
So just, coming from what I've experienced the last couple of years and why I've taken a little bit of a break, I found out as I've been in a mental institution twice for
Wow.
each 10 days, that link is not through the mind. And that's something that I realized, because, our reality is only how we experience it, that's how I've experienced life is through the mind, right? That's the world we live in. It's mental. To understand everything, Sherlock Holmes has nothing on my fucking mind palaces that finally broke the ceiling, not once but twice. But once I did that, and luckily lived through it and have been able to finally synthesize that energy, is that it's love. And moving into my heart center, into this tiny space in my heart where the whole entire universe is, and you go from the macro down to the micro, and you're like, oh, it is literally all inside of me. And then you look at all sides and make peace with all sides of it, the darkness, the light, because we're all of it. You love yourself enough and your family enough, and ultimately it's God, because you're it, split in two, but male, female. But anyway, it's love. So it's just something that I, kind of
Okay.
went
Well,
over my head
okay.
in all the studies. So anyway, love's the link in
Yeah,
my perspective, in my reality.
Yeah, that's quite the hairstyle you got there.
Thanks.
Must take a lot of work.
Actually, not at all. Very easy.
Just joking.
Yeah, look at you. We're twins, although you have more than I do. So
Yeah, right.
a lot less hassle.
So anyway, yeah, the essence of our higher self is the soul that we're linked to first, and its essence is love. And then the soul is linked to what is Christians call our Father in heaven, which is really the monad, and its energy is willpower and purpose. So, but in between, the main link we need to make in order to be able to focus on away from the physical, the worlds of form as being the highest, to the spiritual realms is the soul, and the key to that is love. That's for sure. Okay, what's the difference between one who is governed by the lower and higher parts of ourselves? What's the difference in the way they live their lives? Curtis, I see your image there on my screen, so I'll pick on you.
You picking on me?
Yeah.
Well,
You're my nephew, so that gives me a privilege of doing that.
you have license to pick on your
Yeah.
younger. What's the difference between the way a person lives their lives If
Yeah,
he's,
if for one focused on his higher self and another the lower selves, what's the difference between the two? Say you're friends with one guy who's focused on his lower self, and then you have another friend focused on the higher self. What's going to be the difference in?
well, a lot of it is in your conversation, what you talk about. You talk about spiritual things, or you talk about mundane social things. So your conversation has a lot to do with it. What you read has a lot to do with it. But I find that an enlightened person can have a lot of range. I read everything from this book to things that come my way. An enlightened person has range and depth in the things that he pursues. He's still in the material world. He's not above collecting material things for a while, but he's not attached to any of it. A lower person is very attached to things in the material world.
And
And a higher
do you find that the person, say a friend that's focused on the lower self, he probably has a lot more difficult time keeping your attention, right?
Well, yeah, he talks about things that are, like if you walk into a bar and you listen to the conversation that's going on, it's like, oh, get me out of here. There's nothing that stimulates the mind, ideas. They don't talk about ideas. They talk about things or people. And a more enlightened person will talk about projects, entrepreneurial projects, or spiritual projects, or a book that they might be writing. So their creative impulse is much higher. They're leaving their attachments, like I say, to the world of form and moving into ideas, concepts, and how he can use those to be of service, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, like the lower guy, you maybe the highest thing you might have in common is talking about your favorite football team or something. And but then
Yeah, or maybe what he does during the day for a living.
yeah, what he does for a living, what's his hobbies
Mundane,
are.
mundane things.
I found a major difference between the enlightened and the lower ones. Is the enlightened person is always concerned for the greatest good of all concerned. He's thinking of others above himself.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the biggest differences the more enlightened person will talk about ideas. Now, even if, say, he hasn't studied esoteric philosophy or anything like that, if the person is willing to talk about ideas, he will be interesting for the spiritual seeker to converse with, because maybe he just hasn't been exposed to spiritual philosophy that much, or maybe he was raised in a religion that kind of turned him off. But maybe he's an idea person, and this will often manifest in like the business world. If he gets ideas for a business that will be successful, and this kind of the way we make a living is kind of a bridge for these people. In other words, we have one class of people that are just focused on just trying to survive. They just want to go to work and come home and drink beer and watch TV. But then you have the person that is trying to improve his life, and he's into self-improvement. He's kind of got ideas how to make a living in a productive way. And so this where he enters a world of ideas is kind of a bridge that kind of prepares him for or her for the spiritual thought. But then when the guy moves or gal moves into spiritual realms, then for another person that's into spiritual thought, this person is very interesting. You can just about talk to him as long as they want to talk. And you can talk about all kinds of things, and it will be interesting. Because once a person is on the spiritual path, what else is there to compete for the interest and value of discussing spiritual things? like I'm a fan of our local college football team, and I like talking about them, but it doesn't compare to talking about spiritual ideas. Let's get somebody's idea on this.
Hey, JJ.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have something to add there. I have two friends, they're brothers, and they're in the Boise area. And I've known them for 35 or 40 years. I've known them both. I love them both. Had a lot of good times with both of them. The difference here is that one of them, him and his wife went into a swinger lifestyle, and which is fine. You know, it's they can do whatever they want, but then it started dominating, and it was hard to have a conversation with him without it coming up, and you know, him telling his latest ventures or whatever. The other brother is involved in his church, and even though I don't agree with the church, he is always doing something to help someone, and he's always going out of his way to help someone, and those are the topics of his conversation. And like the one brother that's into swinging, I haven't even talked to in like the last 3 years because it's just too boring. It's just the same old thing, and I just lost. I still love him and care about him, but it's just very annoying to talk to him. And the other brother, even though I don't agree with his religion, I thoroughly enjoy him because just of his, he's always helping someone. It always comes up in the conversation, and I enjoy listening to that.
Another interesting thing is if you go to a family reunion, which probably most of us do once in a while, say there's 20 to 50 people at the family reunion. Who is it that you meet there that you want to spend time with? It'll be people, because you're on the spiritual path, it'll be people that you can talk on a spiritual level to. They'll be the ones you'll wind up spending the most time with. Now, if you can't find anybody on a spiritual level, what's often happens, maybe at least an idea person. If there's some idea person around there, then he or she's kind of fun to talk to. So, but if you're at a reunion and everybody's just centered on just regular stuff, then the spiritual person feels like a stranger in a strange land, even with his own family. But yeah.
Well, what I find is, water seeks its, its enlightenment seeks its highest level. You have to connect with people where they are. If you can't find someone at a higher level, you connect with them where they are, and then you can raise the conversation up. Ask them a few questions, tell them what you've been into, share some ideas. See if you can get an aha out of them.
Yeah, we have a handful of people in our family, Curtis and I do, that we can talk to, but not very many. Most of them just, the highest they can talk about spiritually is what the prophet's up to in the Mormon church.
Yeah, right.
Which is pretty boring stuff, actually.
I'd rather be in a bar.
Yeah. But so anyway, it's interesting. Family members are interesting. Especially what's kind of interesting is we chose our family, but as we looked upon the world before we were born, there's no perfect family to be born into, because there's very few families out there where everybody is interested in spiritual path. Usually they're just among extended family of maybe dozens of people, there might be one or two on the spiritual path that you can connect to after you're born. But your parents will be chosen by you because they will stimulate certain things in you that you need stimulated. My dad was an extremely worldly guy. Curtis can verify that. He's worldly as you can get, but he was very creative, and he instilled kind of a creativity aspect in me, which I really appreciate. And my mom wanted to be spiritual, but my dad kind of held her back till they got a divorce. And but then that she only went so far. So
Well, your dad was very entrepreneurial. He was very entrepreneurial, and he was.
yeah, he was an idea man, at least. Yeah.
He was a very idea man. I got to tell you this one quick story. He was up on this dredger in Idaho City, going through some stuff that he had written, and along come this other guy, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing up there?" And my grandpa said, "Oh, I'm just reading through some stuff I wrote." And the guy says, "Well, let me take a look at it. I'm a bit of a writer myself." And the guy looked at it and read through a few pages, and he said, "Well, you can't write worth a damn, but you're a hell of a storyteller." You know who that was?
Yeah, he gave him his card, and what did the card say?
Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah. Yeah, he says his grammar was really bad, but Hemingway was really
Can't write worth a damn, but you're a hell of a
yeah, he edited his stuff and it reads pretty good. But yeah, he only went to the 8th grade, and he took the 8th grade twice because he couldn't go to any higher grade at that time, so he took it twice. But he never did learn English worth a darn.
Wait, like they didn't have high school in that area or something?
What's say?
Like they didn't have high school in that area at the time or something?
Yeah, I think he had to stay and work on the farm or something, so he could only go to the local school. So he took the 8th grade twice, and so he was unable to go to high school. So that was way back in 1920s, long time ago. Okay, time's about up. Any other comments or questions before we wrap it up? We're going to talk about the mystery of romantic energy next.
That'll be in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, next week
We have the gathering next weekend.
I'll try to get a schedule put together by Wednesday. Then we're going to advertise it on the Keys and invite the Keys people over, and we'll have 1 or 2 meetings just for our group here also. So
Are we gonna do anything with breakout rooms?
I'm not really sure how to do that. You might.
Well, you see, I can tell you privately if you don't want to have it in the meeting. But
How does breakout work?
at the bottom, there's like 4 squares that are together, and it says breakout rooms. You see that?
No, is it under participants or something?
No, it's like in the same box with chat and screen share and record on that panel.
It's not on mine.
It's only on the host thing.
I don't see it. Yeah, I hit chat, and a place to chat comes up. That's about it.
Well, if you're interested, I can show you at some point. It's basically you create these other rooms in the meeting, so you can have like half people go in one room, half people go in another room, or you can have separate rooms for other things like what you're referring to.
Discuss side issues or something, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'll do that. I might, if I get familiar with it, might do that. I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant to try.
All right. Well, let me know if you want to.
I'm not familiar with, but until I get maybe in the future, we can experiment with it with just our group or something, just so I can get familiar with it. Yeah. Yeah, I'll think about that. Let me check that out. Okay, people, we will meet again. We'll have our gathering next week, and then be 2 more weeks before we have a regular standard class. So until then, you guys have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.